Hey, this is Mr. Sparrowhawk. I'm going to show you a little bit about getting set up and ready to play on your snare drum, okay? So this is going to be about setup and about how you grip your sticks and how you position everything and how everything should sort of look, okay? First, we'll talk about, didn't put this together because there are so many different types of stands that I'm hoping you're able to sort of figure out how they're put together by me describing what everything does and what it is. Because again, I have a type of stand that you probably don't have. They typically come with a little bit less expensive, less hard, heavy duty stand that I've got. But I do want to show you because they're all very similar and they have sort of all of the same things just made in a slightly different way that look a little bit different. So on one side of your stand, you're going to have feet, okay? And the feet can go, in many different positions. I keep mine pretty wide, but as you loosen the wing nut here, where the wing nut has like the little wings that you grab onto to loosen and tighten. So as you raise this up, the feet get closer together. And I like it wider because if you have room for it, then it just is more sturdy and it doesn't allow it to tip over as easily. There's usually a wing nut in the middle that allows you to raise and lower the height of your drum. So standing and sitting, that type of thing, okay? So I'm gonna raise this up sort of high so that you guys can see when I'm playing, or showing you how to position rather. We're gonna play more on the next video, not as much on this one. There's a sticky note on my snare drum. So let's see, and then at the top here, there's a piece that again, you're gonna have different shaped ones on yours probably, but you have these things that we call a claw that sort of grab onto the drum. Now, if you have a claw, then you also have this piece down here that opens and closes the claw, okay? So if you were down below it, it'd be, lefty-loosey to turn things, to loosen a screw or open something, you turn left or counterclockwise. If you turn right, then it's righty-tighty, right? So lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. So to tighten it up, you turn it to the right from below. Looks like righty-tighty. Let's see, and again, keep in mind that you're seeing, this is mirror image. I have my camera angle flipped around so that you're seeing everything sort of mirror image of what you would normally see. So that this is my left hand and this is my right hand, kind of like from your perspective, mirror image, okay? So let's see, you can also angle this claw once it's tightened, once it's grabbed. Now some don't actually grab, they don't have a thing to tighten it up, and you're just sort of setting those things up evenly with each other, and then setting the drum just on top of it. But it still has sort of this black thing up here that it sits on, a little plastic or sort of almost rubber, hard rubber piece, okay? But then there's also another wing nut that you can use to sort of change the angle of the drum, okay? And I'm not gonna mess with that. I've got it, usually just keep it fairly flat. You wanna angle it only when you're using sort of, there's some different grips, different ways to hold the sticks, and if you're using different grips, you might want it angled. But most of the time for a snare drum, you're gonna keep it fairly level, okay? So I've got it here so that you can see everything. Generally, again, it's basically flat. There is another piece I want to show you really quick that's part of the snare drum itself. The snares, where they get their name from, are the wires on the bottom that vibrate when you hit the top, okay? They vibrate against the bottom head. So you can turn those on and off with the little lever, and the levers kind of can look different, but usually up means that they're on, and it gets that snare sound. When the lever is down, it's just the sound of the heads vibrating, the drum heads themselves vibrating. So we'll keep that on for now. There may be times when we want it off. Most of the time they'll be on. So that's on. With your sticks, okay, there's a certain way to grip, a certain place to grab them, and there's sort of a balance to it that you find the more you play. What I'm gonna do is give you a general idea, and then the more you play, that may shift slightly for you, okay? But you do want your grip to look kind of generally a certain way. When you start really changing what your grip looks like and moving your fingers in different places and putting different amounts of pressure with your fingers, then it changes everything about how the stick reacts. So you learn to control that, okay? So I'm going to talk about two parts of your grip that you're going to want to remember, okay? We've talked about this hopefully if you had me for music early on, and we talked about playing xylophones and things like that. We talked about what we call the fulcrum, hopefully. If we didn't talk about it, that's what it's called. A fulcrum is like the middle part of a seesaw where it pivots, okay? So there's a pivot there. Now that fulcrum is only going to come into play when we start bouncing the stick. Eventually we will start bouncing, the stick, letting it come down, and then it literally right on that fulcrum there sort of bounces and pivots up and down. Okay, I'm holding this fairly loosely, but that's the fulcrum. Okay, and what happens is you want your thumb print, and the first, if you look at your finger, you've got all these joints on them there, and then at the bottom. So what you want is the first joint, right up there at the top, to be opposite of your thumbnail on the stick, okay? Now, the spot on the stick that is ideal, if you were to cut this in half, it's right about here, right? If you were to cut it into thirds, 1, 2, 3, then take that bottom third, right about there. And that's gonna be somewhere around there. It's gonna be the sweet spot. And different sticks will react differently as well. So it might depend on the sticks you're wearing. But somewhere around that, 2/3 of the way from the tip of the stick to here is where your fulcrum is going to be. And again, that's where, when you bounce the stick, that's where it moves. That's where it pivots, okay? But when we first start playing, we don't bounce the stick very much, okay? So other than just trying it like this, and letting it bounce as much as it can, you'll find that if you squeeze tighter, it doesn't bounce as much. Right? It stops a little quicker. If it's super loose, it lasts a little bit longer, right? But that's for later. And you can be practicing that now in both hands, okay? Finding the right spot, using that fulcrum, bouncing the stick, okay? But most of what we play in the first few weeks, really, of playing aren't going to involve the fulcrum at all. It needs to be in its place, and that's it, on the correct spot, and be sort of shaped in that way, okay? The other part of your grip, we said there's two parts. The fulcrum is one. That's Fulcrum, okay? So the fulcrum. And then the other part is these three fingers. You're going to want to just put them together like that. Wrap them around the stick. There may be a little separation between those two fingers right there. You can see where the fulcrum is and where your other three fingers are. But that's okay, okay? And these other fingers will apply a certain amount of pressure, okay? And it just is going to depend. You actually want to eventually have very little pressure from those. But at first you may have to do some squeezing just to get the stick to hold still. But the object is to get to where you're not really squeezing the stick, but just keeping it still where it's not actually like turning in your hand. Because if you're super loose, it actually will turn in your hand. The stick will, and that's kind of weird too. So you have to have enough control to keep it still in your hand, basically, okay? But then not gripping it really tightly, because that will also cause some other problems, okay? So fulcrum, three fingers wrapped around, but not applying a lot of pressure at this point, just enough to hold the stick still, okay? When you play, it's a knocking motion. It's just like you're knocking on a door, You're not going to knock like this. If you did, you'd last a few knocks and you'd stop. But if you had to knock for a while, you can go a lot longer with just your wrist, right? So that's the way you play also, okay? It's basically just this wrist motion. And any amount of arm motion that may happen might be just a reaction of your hand moving, and then so your wrist has a little jiggle to it or something like that. That's okay, but keep it relaxed, keep it loose, your wrist. Just like if you're dribbling a basketball, but then you tighten up your wrist and do that same motion, it's hard to move your wrist smoothly. And you really want to have smooth, fluid motion. So you don't want to grip tight. You don't want to tighten up your wrists and clench and stuff like that. You want to keep it as relaxed as you can without the stick spinning around in your hand. That's it, okay? So that's your grip. You're doing that in both hands. Sometimes I'll say, like, you know, check your hands, make sure they look the same as each other, right? And then when you play, your tips are together, basically, on a little spot. Sometimes if you wanted to take a quarter or something like that and put it on your drum and draw a little quarter spot on it, and then with a pencil or something, and then you can actually aim for that spot, for both of the tips of your sticks to hit in that spot, if you want to do that, okay? That's good practice. But also you don't want your tips to be hitting each other either. So if you have to spread them out a little bit more, then that's okay. But keep them together and keep them from hitting each other, okay? There's different ideas about whether or not you should play in the center or a little bit off center. I'm okay with anything that, you know, if you think of the middle, I'm going to call it the middle half of the drum. It's basically, think of like a big circle. You know, if you would go from the middle to the edge and then find the halfway and then draw a circle in your head, anywhere in there, okay? As long as your tips are close together so that they're both getting the same sound. What you'll notice is that when you move around on the drum, there's different sounds. So on the edge, it's much different. Even halfway between is a little different. Okay, just because of the nature of the drum and the way it's shaped, okay? So you want to pick one spot for both sticks to be in. Okay, and it can be anywhere in that circle, that middle half circle, okay? So, so you pick a spot, you get your sticks together, and you know, what I would practice doing for now, until we start actually playing, if you want to do that bounce thing I was doing, it's a nice loose grip. Don't worry so much about the playing area, but you should aim for that middle half probably. But then just to feel what that feels like. The other thing you could work on a little bit, if you wanted to do like, I would say do like 8 notes here and then 8 notes here. Okay, think of them as like TTs, like T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T T. The object is to get them to sound like it's one hand doing it the whole time, because it'll sound more even if it's one hand. If you can hear the two different hands sounding different, there may be an issue with like where your sticks are. Maybe you have one stick over here and the other one in the middle, so then you get two completely different sounds. Or maybe your sticks, believe it or not, sticks can be in or out of tune. If you tap on your ear, I don't know if you can hear this on the mic, but you want those to be as close together as possible, because that could affect the sound slightly, okay? Especially at softer volumes. Okay, so I think that covers a lot. Again, make sure that you're in that middle half. If I move around the front, you see my tips are together, right? And when you start practicing, it's that knocking motion. And I always look at the height of my stick tip and try to keep that even. Because if your right hand is doing this, while your left hand is doing this, you're going to get two different sounds. And you want it to be the same. So what I do is practice different heights with both sticks, right? But I do it actually playing, okay? This is loud. You have some options. If you were to go to a music store, buy a practice pad. These are not expensive. I think you can get these on Amazon as well. Probably somewhere around $15, possibly less. And they have a foam pad on the bottom, and you can just set this on top of a drum. And these are good because they feel a lot like a snare drum. They're made with a drum head on the top. And when you play, you can just set it on your drum. And it doesn't, it's not going to bother your family as much when you practice, okay? All right, good luck. I will put up my next video on playing very soon, okay? So look for that. Good luck.